No, okay. Yeah, we're good to go. Hi, Lynda.
Well, hey, can get in then. Awesome. Thank you very much. Thanks very much for having me. So I'm going to kick off this sort of talk with a quick sort of caveat that when I put this abstract in, I thought, as I think somebody said earlier today, I'd be a lot further ahead than we are. And as per usual, I'm a little bit further behind. But I'm going to go through sort of where we've come to, why we've done it, and kind of what we're thinking of. So I entitled this, Game On, Beyond Virtual Field Trips. And it's a collaboration between myself and Rafina Kielon. I always say this wrong, Kalyanova, who was a media student within Bangor. So just a quick sort of intro to the project. It was something that I dreamed up, partly inspired by this very event last year, was to use our internship, which we provide opportunities for students, to try and develop some new resources. I entitled it, Inclusive Teaching Environments for Geosciences. We only had a 2-month time frame that didn't start till May this year, so we had May, June to do some work. And really, I suppose the key aim of the whole project was that it was thinking and addressing inclusivity, fieldwork, and that I wanted to create something that was active, not passive learning. So just to kind of do a little bit more of a background on that. So when I think about inclusive teaching, really sort of during sort of pandemic, it was a real chance for reflection and thinking about how inclusive, our teaching kind of was. So obviously, I work at Bangor University. We've got Snowdonia National Park on our doorstep, Anglesey, fantastic places to take students. And we do make adjustments for students, but really, I kind of thought more and more about this and the fact that, we go to these locations, we make sort of adjustments, but actually, is that reasonable? And was there a better way that we could do it? Was there a better way that we could bring sort of more inclusion and sort of help students access this environment in a way that was working for them? So that kind of drove me initially. Obviously, sort of EDI, I think everybody knows, this is very high on my agenda and kind of where my thinking is sort of coming from. But the whole sort of pandemic, what it sort of distilled in my mind was the idea that there were all these barriers to sort of student engagement, and although, we can address certain aspects of them, and certainly, we try and do that we have a medical form that kind of looks at students who come out on field trips and trying to get students to come forward. That only addresses a certain aspect of it. Obviously, RGS and I sit on the sort of heads of geography group because I head up geography at Bangor. There'd been quite a lot of discussion in terms of, the fieldwork principles and what we were going to do. As a woman who goes out and does fieldwork, there are lots of issues that I've encountered myself, and I don't know, maybe it's partly a reflection of getting older, and it's partly a reflection of actually thinking what's acceptable and what's not acceptable before. So there was a lot of things that have been driving me to develop sort of better fieldwork, and really that idea sort of game on, it kind of has a two-pronged approach, because partly it's like, actually, really we need to up our game, and that's really what I'm thinking about. But it's also, the reflection of the fact that we have these virtual field trips, that we've been able to develop something that actually now are they fit for purpose as we go forward. And it's been interesting just listening to the talks this morning. I think there's a lot of people thinking similar things, and we're singing from the same page. But really, what I want to get at, and what I've been trying to do, is that although, we make adjustments and, that sort of works, a lot of the adjustments are, oh, you can't go on that field trip. Here's an essay. Here's a report. And actually, when you think about it in that aspect, you take half of your cohort or most of your cohort out into a mountain environment, and you're looking at an active landscape, geomorphological processes, relic glaciation, whatever it is. and you're saying to those students that aren't physically able, aren't able to be present in the field, okay, well, we'll just give you this, and that'll be fine, and that's going to work, isn't it? And of course, they don't replicate those fieldwork experiences, and they're certainly not inclusive. So I think what the pandemic was particularly good at sort of doing was bringing these virtual alternatives to the fore. And certainly we saw a huge uptake. It was something that had been sort of bubbling along in the background. I'm certainly not going to claim that suddenly the pandemic went, oh, virtual field trips. They had existed in some form or other for quite some time. But really it was this opportunity to do something new. And I think it was the chance to create something that was inclusive, that was credible. You know, and I think always, you know, your pedagogy has to drive everything. You know, what are we trying to achieve with these field trips? And that's kind of where I started from way back in 2020, was thinking, okay, how am I going to make a trip that's virtual, that's inclusive? And really where I started with was using story maps. And it was great in the sense that I wasn't physically going out in the field. I was quite vulnerable to COVID at the time. So I could deliver my field trips as a live, synchronous experience for all of the students. So absolutely everybody. I'm going to say, please discount the digital poverty and the connectivity issues, because obviously they are a real issue, but sort of thinking bigger picture, you know, deploying a virtual field trip, everybody could be equally present. You know, we had a guided route, this story map, and that link does work. You know, I published the access to it, but it was there to guide students through. It wasn't a 360-degree trip. It was purely some photographs that I had from previous trips. And it was mashed up with a little element of challenge, and I was there to kind of act as the guide, and we tried to get students to produce maps virtually. And that was sort of a great sort of thing when we first did it. What I've subsequently gone on to, and what I'm sort of developing, what this project was really about, was developing a more immersive experience, but still trying to maintain that kind of challenge and that active learning. So there's another sort of link in there that I made with Des McDougall, who quite a few of you will know from the Virtual Glaciers project. He came up and we made some fantastic 360 imagery. But again, it's just, I suppose it's that term guided tour or a field guide, where you could virtually experience that environment. But again, at the moment is a standalone piece. Where's the challenge to the students, and how does that ensure that they are all getting an equal, comparable technique? Yes, it might address some of the issues of trip anxiety, or we could do some pre-field trip learning, but really, how is that sort of equitable? And that's really what the whole idea of my project was, this sort of 2-month internship. So the idea was to actually employ somebody who was an expert. I'm not a filmmaker at all. I try and do my best, but it was to get a filmmaking student. We had, you know, really a lean model, and the budget was effectively that it would pay for the students' time. They had the equipment from my other department, but we were equal partners in this. You know, I kind of had a vision of how I wanted to do it. What the student was really good. You know, they come from an outside environment in the sense that, you know, they're doing filmmaking rather than sort of geography, environmental earth sciences. But they really had their finger on the pulse in terms of actually how students want to interact with some of this material. And that's really that idea that we were moving beyond the static, you know, this idea that we could create an output that was learning on demand, that we had challenge embedded, and that it became participatory rather than just, you know, it's great to scroll through a story map, but how are you sort of developing yourself? So this idea of gaming learning, and again, it's not something that I suddenly dreamt up. It's been around for a while. It seems to be quite an American thing in terms of giving rewards to students in terms of you achieve something, you know, you get a goal, a reward at the end of it. And that's part of the idea that's driving this project, is that if we can turn some of this learning into playing, and we can kind of reward students for reaching a particular benchmark, or have got past a particular stage, it might be more interactive, it might be sort of fun. So where are we actually at? So I was trying to be really clever and put GIFs in this file, but it turns out GIFs are massive. So the videos, if I press play, I don't know, it probably will play the music. I don't want to, I just want to talk over it really. But what we've created at the moment are videos where I've done pieces to camera that are either instructional, give a background. Oh, I'm going to stop that. I hate my accent. But they're trying to replicate an experience for the students so that it feels like they're actually there. Now, this literally, like I say, I really hope we were much further ahead of it than where we are. We've really only got 2 field trips. We've done one in Anglesey, one in Cumidwell, which is where this imagery is from, to create these kind of pieces to camera that will bed together with something else. And that, oh, no, move. Okay, and there's something else, is the idea that we will merge. So the 3 resources I've talked about, the story map, which was kind of the initial point that I started at, the 360 imagery, which Des created, and then these pieces to camera will be merged into a sort of asset that we'll hide. I'm afraid we are going to put it behind our sort of Bangor paywall, in the sense that it's going to go on our VLE, the video footage. Everything else is accessible except the video footage. But the idea that we can try and create a dynamic field course where students, like I say, who are unable to go, are still able to develop the same skills, are still able to develop some of the practices, and give it an equitable sort of field experience. I suppose what we've kind of learned along the way, and it's certainly something that I've noticed that's come through within this day-to-day, is obviously it is time consuming. And I'm going to mention lack of recognition again. It's difficult to get sort of institutional level support, you know, and this idea that we're trying to use sort of digital skills, you know, it's not always easy. Sometimes you don't have the digital capabilities, or it takes a long time. I spent a lot of time Googling or doing online sort of courses. Something that struck me earlier is we talked about, I think Helen mentioned it, about the arms race for, thanks, for the ethical, you know, for the overseas trip. And actually, you know, is the same sort of issue arising here with the digital and the virtual trips, that we've got this digital sort of divide. And of course, we don't want to assume that students can just run with it. So just thinking about sort of going forward, really, what do we need to do? I think what this has taught me is actually we need to co-create our solutions. And I don't think that's just within sort of, you know, your student or your institution. I think we need to work with others. I think it does depend on what the sort of imperatives are. What are we trying to do it for? At the moment, I'm trying to do it to be inclusive to students that can't go out in the field, but also I want to see this resource used for everybody, so everybody is able to do it. It would be great to have greater recognition and reward for these kind of things. I'm sure it'll come. I've not seen it. And I still think there are a lot of barriers to change in terms of getting people on board for virtual field trips, but I'm proposing a 2.0 version, and I'm going to stop there.
That's brilliant. Thanks, Lynda. Anne, do you want to come up, and we'll move over onto the next presentation. If you have questions and comments, please carry on putting them in the chat.
Does it just microphone me?
Yep.
All right. Hi, everybody. Thanks for coming. So, oh, do I need to hold it like this? No? Oh.
Whatever works. Put that on. That's good. Okay.
Hello, can you hear me? Is that right? Good. So we've been working on high resolution virtual geological outcrops. It's something that myself and Marcus Badger have been thinking about for probably 5 or 6 years now. We always thought that if Google Earth could do a thing where you start in space and then you zoom down to Earth, then we ought to be able to do something that allows you to go that bit further, so that you could actually start to recreate geological field trips. Where do I press to move on? That one?
You need to take.
Okay. And then I want to make it bigger. No. Is that right? Okay, no.
It's okay. It's still showing. Just click the next one.
3 dots.
I just want to make it so that everyone here can see like a bigger screen. I present a view. That's it. Cool. Get there. So What do virtual outcrops do? They're slightly different, I think, from virtual field trips in that we are only creating a geological outcrop rather than a sort of full-on multi-area thing. We want them to teach geological knowledge. Geological knowledge involves actually having a piece of rock, being able to walk up to a rock and using what you can see on that rock and as well as what is on the whole outcrop to understand the geological history. They're easily accessible from home and they can be visited multiple times, but as many people have said, they don't replace physical field trips. But what we want to actually do is to create something that students can use more independently. I think a lot of people have said, and students feel sometimes with virtual field trips, they don't have any control. What we want to create is something that students can roam over and as if they were in the field, but are high enough resolution to be able to sort of reproduce more of what you get in the field. We're also hoping that they will increase the confidence on physical field trips. So there are actually a lot of geological field trips available. A really good resource is V3Geo if anyone wants to sort of hunt these things down. But the best resolution is about 5 centimeters per pixel. This is a really nice outcrop from Utah. It was taken from a drone. As a geologist, and Marcus is a geologist here, will be able to look at this rock and sort of say, I know it's sedimentary, I have an idea of how what size grains it's got in it. But any of you who aren't geologists are probably looking at this and thinking, well, it's quite pretty, but I have no idea what it is. And that's what most of our students will be feeling. But we want to get them to that stage where they can look at a rock type and in their head, they kind of know what the whole outcrop is made of and they can build a geological story from it. So there's a little black square here. And if we zoom in just to indicate the sort of resolution, I don't think this probably helps you much more as to determine like what the rock is. So when I say why are ours different, what we wanted to do is to create something where the student can actually go up to the rock and look at it. And now I'm old, I have to do this when I go up to rock, because otherwise I can't. And actually look at the grains, look at the minerals, look at whatever it is that actually makes up that rock, because it tells the whole story. And that just isn't available at the moment. So we had to think about where would be good to go. And when I was an A-level student, we went to Barry in South Wales. And it has the best geology. If any of you go to Barry, you've got to go have a look at this. It's so cool. So for those of you who don't know, Barry's down here. This is a zoom in of a bit called Friars Point, Barry Island over here, which is where Gavin and Stacey used to hang out. It's just up here. And we decided we use something called structure from motion to create a model. Now I'm hoping that I can get this to work. I just need to double check. No, quality. I just need to up quality a second. So this isn't a video. This is a model that we created using lots and lots and lots of overlapping photographs. The reason Barry is so cool is because it has these, you see these sloping rocks here. These are full of fossils. Then on top we have these horizontal rocks. Now where these meet is actually a paleo earth surface. We call it an unconformity. So at some point these rocks, the sloping ones were laid down in the sea. They were then squashed to form rocks. They were then tilted. They then came to the surface. They then eroded off. There go my glasses. And these other rocks were laid down on top. So as a learning thing, it's really cool. And we've been thinking about this for a while, and what we really needed is, in order to take this further, is to be able to prove that we could actually make something that students could use. The only problem with it is it's massive. So when I say massive, this is about 6 gigabytes, and this isn't the whole outcrop. There's no scale on this, I've realised. That's about 20 meters long and about 7 meters high, the whole thing. So I'm just going to stop this one and move on to the next one. We had problems making these. My husband and I were making these on the weekend. This white gap here is actually where we took some very close-up photos in order to create something that's more like what the students would see. So in this, if you were to go up close, you wouldn't be able to see the grains on this one, but on the high resolution one you can. So this is, oh, it's done it again. It's played the same one twice. It does this. Hang on. 7. There we go. You are on HD, aren't you? Yeah. So here we are sort of going in. And this is all, as I said, this isn't a video. This has all been created in a 3-dimensional model. So it's pretty cool. We had a NERC grant that paid for this. We used about half of it to pay for a postdoc to actually do all the modelling and to actually work out how to use a piece of software called AgiSoft, which some of you might be aware of, to create this. And I hope that you can see, starting to see, I'm going to have to stop it here and then get rid of the adverts. Here you can start to see some structures here. These lines, these are actually where the current has carried bits along, and you can start, well, you can see the lichens here. This is about 5 centimetres across. So we're getting there with our more higher resolution things. And then I'm going to pause it and I'm just going to go on. Oh, no, and again. So I couldn't get one of those flyby models of our closest bit because for some reason the system just wouldn't do it. But this is not a photograph. This is a creation from the model. And what I just want to draw your attention to is the scale bar across the bottom. So this line here is 5 centimetres. So if we were actually looking at the full high resolution version of this, some of these little grey dots in here are probably less than 1 millimetre. So from what we wanted to do in this project is to prove that you can create a 3D model of a geological outcrop that is high enough resolution to sort of recreate what you would see in the field. So at the moment, we've got these big models and we now have to work out how we can take it further. How do we present these to students? Can we streamline the photograph taking process to get these? Can we streamline the processing to get this? Can we find a way of keeping the resolution, but sort of downgrading the size so that we aren't trying to present like 6 gigabytes to students? But none of that could be done until we had a kind of thing that we could then take to some techie people and kind of work out what was going on. So we have proved that we can do it. And what we really hope is to be able to create, as I will say, I'm coming at this from an open university point of view where our students don't really get to go on field trips. We do have one in our module that they can choose as an extra module, and some of the students, or an extra sort of, it's not even a credit, but just a field trip. And then the students can go into the field with their tutors, but there's nothing that they have to do. And I feel that they really miss out. And so with these sorts of things, it would be great to be able to set them some more projects and to be able to give them that real field opportunity. So I think I have no idea how long I've been talking for, but probably enough. So there we go.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Anne. Fine, I'll get some. There are some comments in the chat, so you can take a look at those, and maybe we'll have some time, a little bit of time for questions. We're running a little bit late, but this is all great stuff. So next over to Trevor Collins. So just as he's setting up, Trevor's going to be talking about GeoSPACE and flexible fieldwork.
Just get settled. Okay, so hoping that's going to be working. Let me just check that it can be heard reasonably well. Maybe somebody can let us know in the chat or whatever. Oh,
Yep,
I've got a thumbs
some,
up. That's
yeah,
fabulous.
thumbs up,
That's
good.
just brilliant. Okay, let's get rid of the chat.
Oh, can hear you but not see you.
Okay. The seeing thing is yeah, it's not as good as you might think. So don't worry about not seeing my face. That's a privilege left for some of the folks that are online here. It could be an individual connection thing, so don't worry too much about that. As long as you can see the slides, I hope that'll help. Right, so my name is Trevor Collins. I'm a senior research fellow at the Open University. I'm based in a research unit called the Knowledge Media Institute, My area of work is around educational technology, and specifically within that, fieldwork education is a core interest. And I've been working on colleagues, Sarah, Julia, other colleagues at the OU, around inclusion within fieldwork for quite a while. So that's kind of where I'm coming from with this stuff. The work that I'm going to talk about at the moment is a project that I've been involved with some colleagues in the US. It's primarily based at the University of Florida, but there are 3 or 4 other universities that are also involved. It's funded by the National Science Foundation. I have to say that occasionally when we're talking about the work that's funded in that way. So I'm here presenting. I'm Trevor, the first name. My colleague Yesenia and Anita, they're both based at Florida, and they've also contributed to this presentation. So hopefully we'll check in as we go through. So let me just. Right, I'm going to talk a little bit about this project. So there's a project called GeoScience, and there's this icon for over on the right-hand side there, the GeoSPACE project. Really interested in ways in which we can develop flexible formats for fieldwork. For quite a while, we have this issue around, enabling everybody to participate in fieldwork that chooses to or wishes to, and there have been a few problems with that. So that's the space. We're really interested in combining the in-person and remote participation, and the remote participation is something I've been looking at for a while. So the motivation for this was around, some of the traditional fieldwork approaches have some barriers for students with disabilities. We don't really need to say that too often because folks are kind of aware of some of that stuff. The lack of those opportunities. So on one side, a lot of us in different field courses. This is geoscience, but I think the thing is true across most of our disciplines. We really emphasize the professional skill building aspects, the social interactions, the ways in which we become part of our professional identity and part of our social group through fieldwork activities. And then for those folks with some mobility disabilities or whatever, we give them an alternative where they can do the essay or other forms of it and stuff. So there is a bit of a tension around how we phrase this. So the lack of these accessible field courses, therefore, kind of contributes and feeds onto this underrepresentation from groups, not just people with disabilities, but also things, family commitments, work commitments, other aspects and things like that. And certainly some of our experiences. So the aim of this particular project is to try to develop an accessible field course, or at least a field experience, that fulfills some of the requirements that a university would require. Okay, so it is quite a high bar for us to try to do that. Through in-person and online experiences. We've got sort of 3 phases to it. We're starting in the first phase, which has sort of mostly happened, trying to identify a series of suitable locations, because as a lot of you know, that a lot of it is to do with the selection of field sites. And then also the aspect of recruiting students. So we recruited a group of students to work with us on this project as sort of co-researchers, really. And we piloted this year earlier, the piece of work that I'm going to talk about now is a field course that we did a couple of weeks in Arizona in the US, and that was involving a group of students from across the US. So that gave us the first field course to gather some feedback and evaluate some of the approaches and stuff that we were doing. And then the intent then is in the 3rd phase next year to run it again, but with a different group of students. Okay, so we'll learn, develop a process, hopefully have a model that we can roll out, and we test it in the final year. So that's the process for this piece of work. Right, so where are we going with this? The goals, if you like, and they're quite involved. A bit of it is around trying to make the development of it inclusive. So work with people as best as we can. And I'm sure there's all of common experiences around that. One of the other emphases that we're putting on it is the role of mentoring networks. And I think that's came up in quite a few of the presentations today, not just the kind of peer-to-peer student support. So hopefully the students that work with us this year will come back and help mentor and support students that work with us next year. But there's also the faculty student mentoring roles as well, because within the group there's over half of the staff that are involved have a form of disability, okay, but they're still geoscientists. So it's quite a nice kind of role model way of sharing practice and experiences and stuff. There's professional development aspects, and kind of those mirror both the professional practice and the ways in which we're shaping these things. And then also this aspect, which aligns to today's topic, and quite a lot of the conversation we've had is around the sustainability issues, trying to think about this in terms of how we can make this scalable, sustainable, and a format that could work for others as well. So there's a few challenges. The field course that I mentioned, it's a geology specifically, so it would be students in the US. All of them would be involved in undergraduate geoscience courses. Some of them were at different stages. But we had a fairly authentic kind of field course experience. So in the area of Arizona that we're at, there is a kind of quite a well-known geology field tour called the Holy Tour, which is a bunch of holes, effectively, big holes, effectively, that you can tour over a week or so. We condensed that down to sort of 3-day version plus a day at the Grand Canyon, which is kind of known as the biggest hole sort of thing. So that was a kind of a nice way to manage that. In those early sessions, it was bringing the students together. It was developing them as a group. It was helping them to work together and do some group work stuff activities as well. So the kind of standard stuff that you might do, you know, going out, giving them missions, plans of what to do, go out, explore stuff, develop the skills of making observations, things like that. And then we had a day where we synthesized and brought that together. And then a methods day where we developed some further stuff. So using the surface for motion things that Anne was just talking about and things like that. And then the last 2.5 days were a research field site where they hadn't been before, and they were to undertake a set of work across that. So some survey work and stuff like that, led by the students. So they were kind of planning on coming up with research questions and things that they wanted to study of that site. So the student participants, about 17 students, 1 male, 16 female, which is a bit of a shocker for me because in the UK we don't always get such a fantastic representation of females and subjects. But you know, 14 of those people were in the field. And 3 were the ones without disabilities. And in fact, that wasn't the case. You know, it's a good spread across it. Okay, so the bit that I'll focus on in a moment then is the way in which we use technology to try and enable and facilitate used by gamers quite a lot for communications and chat areas and stuff, quite open, quite flexible. The Google Drive was a great space because it was free, cheap, and you could stick a load of stuff in it. So that was really helpful for file sharing and photo sharing and things like that. We were able to set up accounts fairly easily for everybody that was participating. And that gave us like a core base for a lot of communication stuff. That was great. But it was fairly asynchronous, although Discord, a bit like messages and stuff on your phone, and you've got the phone app for Discord as well. It becomes quite synchronous at times because people do effectively have conversations on it as well. So it was incredibly useful in terms of coordinating activity. And then the other one that I mentioned there is Zoom and YouTube Live. So this was a group, we work on a pandemic. Quite a lot of folks and the people who were participating were quite anxious and had a few, you know, challenges and stuff, health aspects. So we needed to be fairly conscious of that, mindful of that. So, you know, using Zoom and things like that was really facilitative in terms of people presenting equitably. And I'll show examples of that as we go through. We've got a couple of minutes to go. Oh, wow. I've made up my slides wrong. I'm hoping that's not going to play yet. Oh, don't talk to us. Don't talk to us, Liz. All right.
Okay, so I think it looks like we've got
Oh. Right. That's not going to help me. My videos don't show, right? Please don't play yet. Okay. Oh, shoot. Oh, no. Forgive me, folks. I'm gonna find- I'm sorry about the video playing. I've messed up my animation on this, the way it builds. And within Teams, I've got no easy way of fixing it. Oh, will that work? Don't play. Have you taken video?
You click take control.
Oh, shit. I'll start again, bless her. Ah. Not sure if it's going to let me do. If both of us are controlling at the same time, it might get a wee bit messy.
You take it.
All right. No, it's really well worth trying it. I'm going to try and get this to stop playing the video, but I don't think I'm going to manage it. I think the other video is going to keep playing. Please don't do this. Yeah, I can see.
Stop your presentation.
Okay. Let me just zip through then to the end. So the bit that I messed up on the presentation there, and apologies for that. The things that I'm going to show you was the way in which the Discord page appeared. So the way that we used that. The Discord, it enabled us to have very flexible communication, and coordinating stuff between the people in the field and the people at home was so much facilitated by that. I cannot say how important it was. It enabled us to let students introduce themselves and staff introduce themselves before they came to the field. It enabled us to bring people together for dinner or any other social stuff, and there was lots of social connection across the group. So for us, that was a huge social glue, and when we've tried to do this in other contexts, it's been very difficult because of that social glue. So that's the Discord bit. Google Drive, people could just share stuff all the time, and they did, through their phones, through their devices, through whatever else. As soon as they got back to the hotel, they would upload stuff, and it enabled stuff to be shared as a group, which made it very inclusive. The Zoom calls enabled us to have those presentations from students that were both online and person and in the field, so they could talk across each other together fairly equitably. The students actually often stayed in their rooms for the meetings, and they all joined on Zoom. So rather than just being the 3 students that were at home on Zoom, everybody was on Zoom, yeah, because they were all 2 or 3 people to our room. So it made it much more sociable and comfortable for their own spaces, and they were all working in the one online Zoom call. The way in which we used Zoom, we had its space kind of mission. We were in an environment where the astronauts were taught and trained. So the folks online or some of the team would take on the role of mission control, and they would brief the students that were going to go out in the field for that day. They would introduce them to the sites they're going to go to. They would explain to them what they should look out for. They would give them a bunch of research questions for them to answer by the end of the day. And that really shaped and moved things through. Yeah. And then the last bit there, the live streams, which we'll demonstrate tomorrow if they work, enabled us to do broadcasts from the field. Okay, so Liz, one of the tutors who came up there and couldn't stop her from talking, she and I went out and we did a live stream from the field site the day before the students went to it. Okay, so we played the role of the Mars rover. Okay, and Liz was particularly effective at introducing things that could be seen and described visually. So color, shape, scale, things like that, but no interpretation. And this was really useful because it really got the students thinking and questioning. Yeah. So the ways in which we use the tools, I apologize for screwing up in the slides. My fault, that's the animations of that. So let me just summarize some of those little bits and we'll finish up. So the evaluation, there's lots of observation, group interviews, things like that. The things that we're finding out so far is feeding people is the most important thing for us. It enabled people to think, it reduced a lot of anxiety. It also facilitated a lot of pre-field work conversations, which enabled and opened a lot of doors. Yeah, so feeding was so important. Roles and responsibilities helped, honesty and teamwork. So, you know, we don't have all the answers, but we're working out together. That kind of works. And then the mentoring and peer support that I mentioned previously. The challenges was synchronizing the diaries. You know, once you're in the field, the clock can go out the window, and we were really forcing people back on the clock. Always cake. All right, so where we are now, we're recruiting new students. Hopefully, as I said before, there'll be those peer mentors, and we'll be looking at trying to do it for course credit, and that's the group that we're working with last year. So thank you very much. Sorry to screw up.
Okay, so we're running a little bit behind time. That's okay. It's just how it is. Lots of people are really keen to carry on talking and sharing their experiences. So we'll maybe have some questions in the chat if you could post up questions and some of the speakers can respond. But at the moment, then we're going to move on to the next thing, which is Addy and Dave.
We will be probably